Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the overall political situation. Of course, as the new Prime Minister has also now going to be taking oath on the 14th. The ramifications of course, the judgment as far as the Supreme Court is concerned, overall as far as the politics now of the PML-N is concerned, what kind of as the stance as far as the PML-N is concerned after the decision of the Supreme Court. We'll be talking about the legal parameters of the Supreme Court also. We've seen the Parliament exercise its own powers and whether the effect of curtailment of it overall as far as the legality of this decision stands, all of the options available, if any, all of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Qaiser Ahmad Sheikh from the PML-N. Thank you so much for being with us today. We also have with us Umer Gilani, who's a legal expert. Thank you for being with us. Qaiser, of course, this decision, it's you know, as far as for the PML-N, it's certainly not a welcome one. We've also seen the Parliament exercise its powers and that having been struck down. How do you overall look at it?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. As you yourself mentioned, this decision is not welcoming for PML. And we discussed it in a National Assembly. We passed this that there should be the maximum 5 years should be the a period in which one could be debarred from taking participation in the election. But now the court has decided against it. We still feel that it is our Prime Minister yesterday said, Mian Shahbaz Sharif, that it just they decided after dissolution of the National Assembly. Had there been some judgment before that, we would have discussed in the National Assembly again. But now the things are there.
But it seems like it seems like the timing also was thought over, you know, premeditated, so to speak, and you know, giving you not a lot of options, I would say. Let me go to Umer Gilani to discuss whether any at all. Gilani sir, your overall opinion on what is, you know, do you think that there are any options at all available as far as the PML-N is concerned now? As far as Mia Muhammad Nawaz Sharif Saab is concerned?
I think today's judgment is only about the constitutionality of the act that was passed.
But it has ramifications for him.
To create a forum of appeal for those who have who are aggrieved of the judgment of the Supreme Court under 184(3). The question of those individual decisions still remains. But if I may…
What do you mean?
Because the constitutionality of this one act doesn't end the chapter.
Okay.
There can be future acts, future legislations by future parliaments, and the Supreme Court will again have a chance to look at the same question.
But it has to be something that the Parliament has to do.
The Parliament will have to pass another act of
as far as having recourse to any appellate process, where is that, you know, it has that, this is a review, am I right?
Right. So this particular judgment can also be reviewed by the Supreme Court.
Okay.
And we have seen in the past…
Isn't this a review jurisdiction itself?
So the review jurisdiction was expanded through an act of Parliament.
Okay.
And the Supreme Court has struck it down.
No, I'm saying when the Supreme Court has struck it down, this itself is not a review.
Right. So this judgment can still be reviewed.
Okay. This judgment
by the Supreme Court itself.
Fair enough. Fair enough. This judgment can be reviewed, and of course for that the legality of it is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that there have to be 3 judges. The author judge has to be a part of that process?
The convention is that the author judge is always a part of the bench which reviews.
And the judges who are on this judgment, they also have to be a part of the review?
Normally they do, but if somebody retires, they're not. There are some precedents such as the Hubara Bustard case, which are not very widely well looked upon in the legal community, where this precedent was departed from. But generally the judges who were part of the bench should be on the review bench. But a larger bench can also be formed to review the same question. So there are many options that the Supreme Court still retains.
The Supreme Court, as far as we are going to be looking at a change of the Supreme Court very soon.
The Supreme Court's leadership has, the courts remains the same, but under a new Chief Justice, the complexion and the approach and the jurisprudential bent of the court does change. So if this case, this judgment is reviewed under a new leadership, a new Supreme Court leadership, different outcome is possible. I do want to speak about the merits of the judgment as well, if I may.
No, I'm not going to be talking about that, but I'm just at this time talking about the options available.
Yes.
Of course, I mean that's a reasonable question for the PML-N, or for example the effectees, and it's not just the former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif Saab, but also Jahangir Khan Tareen, I mean, who are qualified for life.
I think the number of people who have been aggrieved of judgments under Article 184(3) is in the thousands, not in.
So it would. So the effectees are in fact.
It's a very sizable number of people, and they include school teachers and employees and whatnot.
Okay.
So this question, I think we don't do a service to the country by limiting this question about whether judgments of the Supreme Court under Article 184(3), the suo motu jurisdiction,
can be reviewed,
can or cannot be appealed, is not a question that pertains only to the PMLN or to other politicians. But it is a question for citizens.
Right.
Your or my rights could also someday be determined by a misguided Supreme Court, and we would have no recourse to justice. So that is the light in which I look at this question, and I don't think that this question has been properly answered by the judgment today.
Okay.
So I do hope that the Supreme Court will again have an opportunity to look and re-examine this question. The right to appeal is a fundamental right. To deprive citizens of that right is not in accordance with the scheme of the Constitution. The soul and spirit of the Constitution has been defeated.
Fair enough. Let me go to Qaiser Saab. Qaiser Saab, you heard what Umer Gilani is saying, and I think that a lot of, I understand that the effectees of this Article 184 and the fact the appellate process of it might be in thousands, but particularly with regard to the political process, of course, Mian Nawaz Sharif Saab is, has been, and I think is the actual head, in the hearts of your voters, and that hasn't changed. Do you think that this judgment in any way changes that for the next elections? Do you see his arrival? Do you see him now also? Because of course the nara of the slogan of Wazir-e-Azam Nawaz Sharif Saab was raised by the PMLN very, very, just recently.
No doubt in it that our leader, PMLN leader is Mian Nawaz Sharif. We feel that he has the attraction for the people, and a vote bank is there. So definitely we will like, and we will desire that he should be the leader. He should be addressing the public meetings, and he should have his own point of view to the people. It's very attractive for the people. And I agree with Umer here that there should be a right of appeal. So this is just forever. You can debar a person for just forever, and it's not for a single person. It's a huge number of people are involved. So there should be a appeal right should be there, and new Chief Justice by next month. Maybe that this is again appeal goes to him, and there may be a difference of opinion. But presently there is a judgment which is a unanimous judgment, and it changes our whole politics. It's very, because we have few leaders.
Was it anticipated in any way? Did you see it coming at all, the PMLN?
You see, PMLN will will never like to accept it. You see,
No, I'm saying, were you expecting this to happen at all as far as the PMLN is concerned?
You see, the expectation is always there. Why, when we made
because there have been doubts expressed
in constitution, we made some amendments and we made changes. Even at that time, there was a apprehension. And yesterday, the Prime Minister, when he said that it should have been during the tenure of the National Assembly, so it means that we were expecting that after National Assembly period, there can be a judgment like this. It was not during National Assembly, but you see, it's very important for our politics. We have to decide for once that what is actual position. Who, if this continues, I think it will be very difficult for the leaders to have. Maybe these leaders are now debarred. Another time. So leaders don't leaders don't come up in a year or two. It takes decades that a leader is accepted by the public, and you see, it's a long process.
And
during this, if few leaders we have now, which have been elected, the Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif had been elected thrice. Now this is we feel that he may be a Prime Minister a fourth time. So it's not so easy. Since last 3 decades, he's being loved by the people. And it takes a long time to have another leader, to have the love of the people and the affiliation and liking. So it takes time. I think it's not so acceptable to public readily.
Okay. Umer, as far as this whole process is concerned, how long, I mean, there's a time period for appeal also, right? Can you take us through that? I mean, it's from the decision, I believe how long is it, a year? How long is it?
The review has to be filed quite soon, within 30 days.
Okay. And in this case, it'll be an appeal or a review?
It would be a review.
Okay.
Because there is no appeal.
There is no appeal. So as far as this review is concerned, it has to be filed in 30 days and it has to be taken up in that time, or it can be taken up?
No, the Supreme Court can take it up at its own pleasure, and that's also part of the problem, because there is no guideline. The Supreme Court's procedure on issues of case management of bench constitution is extremely scanty. There is absolutely nothing written.
Okay.
As a result of which, there is often room for those who are sort of controlling the Supreme Court, the Chief Justice and his registrar, to decide which cases to fix, which ones not to fix, which ones to assign. But hasn't it
always been this way? The discretionary jurisdiction, one can call it, or the discretionary ambit of the powers of the CJ have always been that way, right?
I would think that until the early 70s, this was not the case, because the Supreme Court used to sit as one bench.
Okay.
Supreme Courts in most parts of the world comprise of 5 or 6 or 7 or 9 judges at the max.
Okay.
And they always sit and decide every case together. But in Pakistan and also in India, a somewhat unique situation has arisen, where a lot of cases are going to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court now sits in small benches who decide cases separately.
Okay.
And because there are a number of benches, the Chief Justice decides to call the shots on who will hear which case, which effectively determines the outcomes. These questions cannot be buried by one Supreme Court judgment today, even if the powers that be may want it. So this question, these are burning questions. Do we really have a right to appeal in our Constitution? Is this really a fundamental right? That question can never be wished away by one judgment.
But constitutionality, and also the fact that amendment to the Constitution, if you talk about amendment, of course that would require a 2/3 majority. We don't know what the results of the elections will be, but at this time, for any one party, Qaiser Sahab, do you see, as a politician, you've been, you're in your experience, do you see that kind of a landslide at all for any political party?
Presently, whatever is the sin, I don't feel there could be a landslide victory for any party. You see, now the split is there. and the coalition government was there for about 16 months. So all the parties had share in the government. The situation, you see, I gave an interview to ARY 2-3 days ago. I mentioned that you see the parties are popular in one province. Our party, even we don't know, I live in Karachi, and I have invited many times to my leaders to come to Karachi to make some organization. So since we don't have any following, and similarly People Party has no following in Punjab, in some areas, otherwise no. So if this is the situation, how can landslide victory for one single party? And if there is a coalition, you see, you cannot make decisions. It will have to take longer time. You see, all parties have their own manifesto for the matters, particularly financial matters and economic matters. No, how can like state-owned enterprises which are making huge losses, but one party is in favor of just keeping like this, and if a PMLN, for example, likes to make it privatized, how could that be privatized? Cannot. We don't have that required number of members with us. So it will take time. So economic matter, you see, the unification of decisions, like I have seen very closely Chinese model of politics. Since last 51 years, I have been frequent visiting on business to China. You see, they have removed 800 million people from the poverty. And on the other hand, since last 15 years, our democratic process is continued. All three popular parties, national parties, had a chance to be in the government. For example, 4 years were given to PTI, 5 years to People Party, and if this 1 year is included in PMLN, we got 6 years. But in 15 years, I feel Pakistan people are not happy, or people are not going to have a better standard of living. 15 years did not change, and in last 5 years, you see, I acknowledge that Mia Shahbaz Sharif did very hard work, and he is a very intelligent person, and he's
doer.
having all these parties with him. But still, you see, this year the growth was almost nil. That was the continuation of PTI. In last 5 years, Mia Sahib himself, Mia Shahbaz Sharif himself mentioned that 2.55% is the population growth, but the growth, our own growth, is not 2.55%. So per capita in last 5 years we did not enhance anything. So there was not any development or not any increase in the standard of living of the people. And again, there is a difference between the rich and the poor. You see, the last government, I mentioned on various occasions, why was it possible that 625 people got huge loan of $3 billion, which is equivalent to around 85,000 crores of rupees. And the same amount government is taking loan. On the one hand, few rich people were given on the plea of the industrialization huge amount. The same loan is being taken by the government, and government is paying interest, and that interest now has to be imposed for taxation. And most of our taxation is indirect tax. So I mean that the harmony of the political party is not there, and we cannot have consensus on economic matters. And it is very difficult. I am not seeing that landslide, as your question was, landslide victory. And if some coalition, even next government will be a coalition government, and it is very difficult to decide and to have making decisions like the matter of SOEs, state-owned enterprises, because people parties from the beginning, they are not in favor of that. Even PTI was, when we were privatizing in last tenure in 2018, PIA was being given to the private sector, or some partnership, private and public-private partnership. That was vigorously opposed, and there was strikes and by the PTI government. So at least the Charter of Economy should be discussed and debated. Whenever in Pakistan, I feel up to 1969, first 22 years, Pakistan was developing very fast. Even other countries were giving examples of development of Pakistan. IMF used to say Indian growth was many times I remember they said it is a Hindu rate of growth. But after that, what happened in 71? We confronted, the parties confronted, and we had dismemberment. Then again in 1977, the parties confronted, there was a political turmoil, and the development all stopped. Martial law was imposed. And this third time, always in 3.5 years, PTI have been saying, Chor Daku, Chor Daku. We repeatedly asked them to sit together. Our
Yes.
leader, Mian Shahbaz Sharif, even Bilawal Bhutto Zardari, they offered to sit together to come and discuss. But if some parties are not, and the people are having their support also, their support is there. So I am not seeing, we would have to sit together. We would have to make some charter of economy. We should be thinking that some minimum agenda. Otherwise, a huge population of our 240 million people, I feel that it is not so easy to get that fast rate of growth which China or South Korea or Vietnam, they are getting.
Let me come back to you, Qaiser Sahab. Umer, as far as, so you know, my question really of a constitutional amendment on the cards seems far off at this time. We don't know what the election results will be, but like Qaiser Sahab was saying, at this time, as far as the party position is concerned and overall, it seems difficult for any one party to have that kind of majority. So of course the only option is, you know, the Supreme Court. As far as this decision is concerned and other decisions like it, it's about the curtailment essentially of the CJ's powers, and there's huge debate on that itself in the legal community itself. Isn't that true?
Absolutely. I think as far as the Chief Justice's arbitrary powers of bench constitution is concerned, the question of providing a right of appeal to those aggrieved of suo motu orders, these questions are not just being debated by us in this talk show. They are being debated by the legal community, and even within the Supreme Court of Pakistan, there is a serious disagreement between various justices on these questions.
Okay. Yet this decision is unanimous.
This is not a decision of the entire Supreme Court. This is a decision of a 3-member bench.
Yes.
And the history of this case is that there were other people on the bench, and gradually
Yes, of course I know. Yes.
it all whittled down.
Yes.
So these questions, you know, there's an air of dismay and there's an air of disappointment today. But I do want to say that this is a temporary phase. If those who feel strongly about a right of appeal in the Supreme Court, those who feel strongly about doing away with the arbitrary powers of Chief Justice shouldn't lose hope, because if we keep advocating for these noble principles, ultimately they will triumph. And I do want to take in, you know, we are speaking today on the 13th of August, on the 12th of August, and our Independence Day is just around the corner. So I want to give, you know, hope and optimism to our people, because any independent country which does its own, which takes its own decisions, has these questions are there in every constitutional democracy. The American Supreme Court is never unanimous.
Okay.
And very often the various branches of the American state, the Congress, the President's office and the Supreme Court are at loggerheads.
Okay.
So these disputes are very much part and parcel of our constitutional system.
But isn't it true, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, the kind of what can one call, the kind of acrimony that we've seen between the current Supreme Court and the current, not current now, I mean the last National Assembly is perhaps unprecedented. Would you agree with that?
I think that's true, and that's part of the
evolution.
That's part of the evolution of our constitutional democracy, because Supreme Courts before this one have also manhandled and given a bad deal to parliaments before. They have ousted prime ministers earlier too, and there is no doubt that from 2017 onwards, the Supreme Court, or at least some parts of it, were unfortunately part of some sort of a conspiracy against our democratic system. And there were chief justices in the past who were using suo motu in a manner which is far worse than the outgoing chief justice.
Yet the powers of suo motu were never questioned then.
Back then, they were not questioned as vociferously.
But they were questioned, you're saying?
They were being questioned even back then. But the fact that half of the Supreme Court today, the Parliament, the executive branch of the state, and a lot of us in the public discourse are now standing solidly against those arbitrary practices. That is the progress we have achieved in this country. And we may not be there, but we will eventually get to a point where these problems will be resolved.
Let's hope so. Qaiser Sahab, who is going to be leading the electoral campaign now? Maryam Nawaz Saiba and also Shehbaz Sharif Sahab overall? And we don't know as far as Nawaz Sharif Sahab is concerned. Of course, we saw recently also Maryam Nawaz says that he will return very soon.
Yes, of course. You have asked a good question. You see, I think both of these leaders will continue their persuasion to the people. You see, the young generation, we have found a young leader, Maryam Nawaz is representing them, and there is a huge percentage of young voter. So now young voter being attracted by the lady, and she vigorously worked on it, and and then Mian Shehbaz Sharif is a very popular. He's a person who had made consensus. Up to now in Pakistan, I have never seen. Whenever in politics I am, there has been confrontation, and with confrontation we could not attract the direct foreign investment. You see, that is the most important matter. We should have industrialization. We should have more and more production and export-led growth, so that the prices come down. Inflation is there, and Mian Shehbaz Sharif rightly proved. I am very much appreciative of his policies, but I can also say that he could not do what he actually desired, because he had to take other partners along with him.
13 parties.
Had he a chance to make some decisions himself and more majority in the parliament, I definitely tell that he is a person who believes in results. Very workaholic person, hardworking, and has a vision. I worked with him in some meetings. You see, but he should take more decisions. Up to now, he is reluctant to take decisions because he feels there may be some opposition there. Now a leader should always be ready to have some opposition. So for the next election, both of these, I feel.
But isn't it true that, of course, Maryam Nawaz's dynamic presence and her style of taking decisions perhaps balances it out?
Yes, Maryam Nawaz, I mentioned to you, has proved to be, he took opposition, he took resistance, and she is bold. She is bold to make decisions, I feel, and his backing is that of our prime leader, Mian Nawaz Sharif. She is also getting advice from him, so that is her strength. And PMLN, but I tell you one more thing, that these parties are not as popular as they were in one time. You see, because the result, no party has given results, and there is not democracy in the parties.
But Qaiser Sahab, it is said that in elections, the party that is in the government is always, perhaps less likely to do as well the second term. I'm just saying that it is said, and in this case, all 13 parties have been in the government. So, overall, except one party, which is not, how do you see that party now doing with the former Prime Minister, the head of PTI now in jail? How do you see their overall performance as far as the leadership is concerned? We haven't at this time, heard what's going to happen as far as awarding tickets, the overall process is concerned.
You see, PTI has their own point of view, their own thinking, their own. They made confrontations, but the people also like their point of view. No? In democratic process, you can't say that all these people, there are difference of opinion. I am looking forward to the next election, which are very important. PTI should definitely be given.
Do you think they can be a part of your coalition, perhaps, in the next?
Why not? In politics, everything is. You see, those people who are not involved in that, who are not convicted by the court, because 9th May was yesterday. Bluntly, Prime Minister mentioned that it was against army. All these action was, and it was a revolt. So you see, those people who are just proved to be doing this action, these actions of 9 May, those can't be included in the government.
Right,
but others who are not convicted, who are not involved, why not? They are Pakistanis, they are our fellows. So I believe in it, and I even in that period when they were asking us Chor Daku, I had been telling always that people have elected, even your party's members have been elected by the people, our party's member. But now what my point is that I am not seeing a single party
You're saying
to
that
be
of course,
having dominant position. So we would have to make coalitions and we would have to take each other. But still, very good sign is that you must have seen that CCI, that Council of Common Interest, made decision just in few hours. It was in many years we could not decide about it. So the things are changing. Now the foreign direct investment is coming here because army themselves, they took participated in, you see, one window is facilitation. What happened, I have been seeing 40 years, I am a business since very long. We have been claiming, but even one paper doesn't move from here to there in a short time.
And it's now happening, you're saying, finally.
It's not happening, but now there is a direction towards that, that this should happen. Otherwise, Pakistan is not going to get development. Anybody who is thinking that Pakistan will develop with fast rate, with this huge population growth, it's not a right thinking. Yes.
Umer, overall, as far as the former Prime Minister, PTI chief is concerned, there is now, not one case, but the number keeps increasing. But one or two of the cases, particularly the foreign funding one, the Tosha Khana also, and as far as the Al-Qadir Trust case are concerned, these three cases, do you feel that they're coming to a close in your experience as a lawyer? Do you think it's going to be a long process for him, or do you think that they're at a stage now where, I'm asking legally speaking, regardless of how things go politically, and you think that they will be sooner rather than later at the stage that they're in at this time?
I think firstly I want to say that Imran Khan is the former Prime Minister of my country. And regardless of my political affiliations, it gives me absolutely no pleasure to see a democratically elected Prime Minister in jail.
I think that's true for all elected Prime Ministers.
I think that is something which is common to all of us who are citizens of this country.
Yes, I think that for all elected Prime Ministers to go to jail, I think everybody has their opinion on that.
There's some pain when
my question is not political. I'm asking, I don't want to go down a political road. I'm only asking you that legally speaking.
Right, I want to respond to that question while expressing that I feel some pain in answering that question. The painful reality is that the pace at which these cases will proceed depends upon the political environment.
Okay, but again, I'm not asking about the political environment.
Some of these cases were opened up 7 years ago, the foreign funding one, for instance.
But isn't that true for normal citizens also? There are so many cases that are pending in your legal system for years and years, and people die, and those cases are then, decided.
I think that is the painful reality of our judicial system, and what we have seen in the last year.
And yet we've been unable to have any reforms as far as the legal system is concerned.
The pretense of justice that both lawyers and judges give to people has been somewhat exposed, because we have seen that the cases of those who deserve justice don't get priority, whereas those who deserve revenge or perhaps some sort of political retribution, their cases can be pushed pretty fast. So, how long is it going to take? I think that is a question which will not be decided by the law. It will be decided by the powers that be.
Again, I will repeat myself. My question is not about political considerations. My question is not about powers that be. My question as a lawyer to you is that the stage that they're in at this time, what is the normal time that it would take?
If it were a normal appeal against a 3-year sentence,
yes,
I would not expect it to be decided before the end of the year.
Okay.
It would normally take in the Islamabad High Court more than a year for an appeal to be fixed. If the application for suspension of sentence is denied.
Okay.
So, if you get convicted in Pakistan for an offence, the odds are against you actually. Even if you were wrongly convicted, maybe after a year or so, you will be told that actually, sorry, you were incorrectly convicted. You now ba'izzat bari, and no compensation is ever paid. The pity that I feel for some political prisoners, I feel a lot more of that for the ordinary citizens who have unfortunately
I mean, there are a lot of people languishing in jails at this time.
These very people who are now suffering, and who are suffering because their celebrities is being projected everywhere, are partly responsible for the miseries of thousands of other prisoners who are languishing in prison for no good reason. And while they had power, they did absolutely nothing to improve the conditions of prisoners in jail, to improve the speed, to provide speedy and expeditious and inexpensive justice. So, if anything, I think those of us who feel pity for what is happening now should come together and do something to reform our system of justice, which is meant for the ordinary citizen, and it should work for every citizen equally.
But why do you think we have not been able? I mean, of course, every political party should have moved towards reform, and I'm not denying that. But one particular party came with the slogan of change and reform. We can't change. We can't, deny that. Why do you think we are consistently not being able to go towards things like, legal reform? I
think since we are, pretty close to the 14th of August, I think it's important that we understand why was the state of Pakistan created. It was created to provide people an equal playing field where they can have justice. The role of our state is not just to provide people with infrastructure, health and education. Perhaps even more important than all of this is to provide them access to justice.
Which is very important.
To inexpensive and expeditious justice.
Let me come back to you. We have with us Liaquat Shahwani, who is a former spokesperson for Balochistan government. Ji, Liaquat Saab, can you hear me? Ji, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Ji, Liaquat Saab, of course, we are going to, the caretaker prime minister has been chosen overall as far as the Balochistan situation is concerned, the dissolution there. Overall, what is the political scenario in your opinion now?
Well, first of all, I congratulate Mr. Imran Khans. He is from Balochistan, a very mature politician, a political technocrat, and my personal friend, just like a brother to me. And people of Balochistan are very happy that they have got this opportunity to have appointed such a political worker from Balochistan as caretaker prime minister. And hopes are very much high, but the powers are limited of any caretaker prime minister. Nonetheless, people of Balochistan, I can feel everyone happy from this opportunity. And we hope that Imran Khans, as caretaker prime minister, he will conduct free and fair elections, and also whatsoever in his hand, in domain, in his power, he will try his level best to serve the Balochistan as well Pakistan.
Fair enough. Thank you for your input on that. But overall, as far as dissolution of assembly there is concerned, the provincial assembly, how are things in that department?
Well, if you're talking about Provincial Assembly of Balochistan, that has been dissolved today. If you could repeat your question.
Now the process will start as far as the caretaker setup is concerned in the provinces also.
Yes, today the provincial government has been dissolved. By Tuesday, the Chief Minister of Balochistan and opposition leader, they will nominate someone as caretaker Chief Minister Balochistan. There are a number of names being floated, but let's see how they will decide, and the criteria which we think and which the people of Balochistan desire, that the Chief Minister shall be educated, competent, and non-corrupted person, as Anwarullah Kakad. Anwarullah Kakad is a competent, educated person, and also he has been the spokesperson of Balochistan, and for the last 5.5 years, he is a senator, but nobody has ever blamed him for corruption. So he's such a transparent name, same kind of name we are hoping and desiring for the caretaker Chief Minister of Balochistan.
Right, fair enough. Thank you so much for your input, Liaquat Shahwani Sahab. Thank you for joining us. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for being with us. Qaiser Ahmad Sheikh Sahab, thank you for joining us. Umer Gilani, thank you for being with us today. Overall, of course, as far as the caretaker government is concerned, we will see, further the cabinet and the constitution of the cabinet and all of that to follow very soon. As far as the overall scenario is concerned, of course, in the next couple of weeks, the electoral campaigns will start, and we will be able to see what the overall scenario is as far as party positions are concerned, as far as electoral campaigns are concerned. Let's wait for all of that. Thank you so much for joining us today on Prospect.